Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I am here to introduce y'all Timothy Kleinert. He is a game designer and author of The Mountain Witch. How you doing today, Tim? Or Timothy? Is it
I
Timothy or
am
Tim?
doing all. Usually just Tim. Um,
Okay.
of course, this is an official podcast, so I put my full name down on the screen.
I
Just Tim. You can call me just Tim.
I've just converted to Liz to my mother's chagrin. So for people who have not heard about The Mountain Witch, what is this game about and how does it play?
Well, the good old elevator pitch, which I've given tons over the years, is um, it is a. I guess nowadays it's not. I would still call it a short RPG, but it not a one shot, but a short. But it's a short tabletop RPG where you play Ronin, masterless samurai, and you are all hired to climb Mount Fuji and kill the mythical mountain which lives at the top. Except each of the player characters carry with them a dark fate that always creates some sort of ulterior motive for why you are there. Um, but beyond that, the actual rules of the game of conflict resolution involve the use of trust. Ahead of time, the players have to give each other these trust points, which then later the other players get to decide whether they're going to help or betray you. So it does totally create this big tension within the group and within all of the evilness and all of that kind of stuff.
Nice. And so this game has been kind of through a long development. This is not the first edition, correct? You've had multiple editions of this game.
Well, this will be the second.
Okay.
Really, there was only the first. Yeah, the again, for the people that aren't familiar or never heard of it, the game was originally created in '04 for the Game Chef design contest, which I think is still going, but I don't know. Um, and the idea there was the premise of the game is that you had to make a full RPG in 1 week that used a number of elements. It had to be a fantasy game that used the elements of ice, assault, dawn, and island. Or sort of you had to somehow incorporate those themes or images or whatever, however you wanted to. Um, and so that my idea, of course, I mean, I in my book I do talk about the process of how I actually came up with the game stuff, but of course the idea of Japan, an island, Ronin, who are sort of both who are alone, socially islands, who have to assault a mountain in the ice cold at the top, icy top of Mount Fuji, um, and all of that. Anyway, so that's why the game came about. I'm sorry, what was your question though again?
Oh, I had
I'm
wanted
like
to know about
losing
its.
my train of thought.
No, it's all good. I wanted to know how about its development process. So that's actually perfect. Because how do you go from game jam to publishable game?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I will I'll say that this is my second that mountain, which was actually my second. A couple of years prior to that, I helped a friend expand a 10-page RPG to a 100-page RPG. But I laugh now, we the term came up that it was really just a heartbreaker. It was basically just emulating D&D, but we had like instead of, whatever 4, 6, 8 classes, we had like 20 something classes, and they all had their own charts for like how to level up, and they all had their own abilities. We just like made this huge collection of things that we had a lot of fun. I mean, looking back, the way I eventually got involved with the website The Forge, which is where the indie RPG movement sort of began and where the Mountain Witch was made. Me and my friends thought that maybe it would be really great if we tried to publish that Heartbreaker game. Um, but of course, after actually getting into online discussions about game design and all of that, I realized that that wasn't a true like game, and not a game, but I realized it was this heartbreaker that I really was just trying to make another D&D rather than actually designing a new game. Um, um, but I'm still trying to think like how did the game development thing happen? Um, it's tricky. So on one level, I did a lot of things at that point actually very instinctual. I was sort of like starting to have different after joining the Forge. We had all these discussions about different styles of play. Back then it was sort of prior to that, there was sort of assumed in the mainstream that there was sort of one way to play an RPG. But at the Forge, the idea of back in the day, we called it the GNS, either gamism or narrativism or simulationism. This idea that there are multiple types of games that have different purposes and that players get different things out of it. And after getting involved with the Forge, I did realize how interested I was in the narrative sense of actually creating a real story. And even eventually, it came more to, I think, about RPGing now, much, at least my style, as being much more about improvisational storytelling. Um, and the Mountain Witch really, really does that. I think one of the reasons it is so good is because it really is made um, it's made to inspire play. It's not about you're playing some competitive game and you got to follow the rules in order to win. But really, what the rules do is inspire the creativity within the players, and it does sort of direct those ideas in the direction of the story in certain ways.
So now you had a first edition that came out,
Yes.
and then you had a second edition that was coming out, but it did not happen, and now it's coming out through CLGS. So let's kind of walk through that. What was going to change between first and second edition of this game?
Yeah. Well, let me real quick say too. So the game when the game was made for the for that contest, it very quickly got a lot of attention at the Forge, and it actually did get quite a lot of playtesting
Yep.
compared to other people. Um, but the hard part is, or in retrospect, the hard part is that at the Forge, everyone was a part of this big discussion. A lot of people had very similar gaming experience, so they very much understood what I was trying to communicate in the text. Um, so when I published the game, I thought that it was well written, but it was only when it went out into the public and non-Forge members started playing the game did the big questions come up. And I have to admit, like the big question is I realized in the book itself, I didn't even talk about the ambiguity of the Mountain Witch themselves. See, so part of it, so like stereotypically, this is the way the game works. Is it starts off, it appears just like this standard sort of fantasy adventure. You guys come together and meet, um, or you start off. It's like the game starts off right after you've met for the first time, and you fight your way, through the haunted forest, and you start to climb, and it is this thing where you're like working together and you're killing all of these monsters. But then suddenly you hit the castle at the top of Mount Fuji that the Mountain Witch is running, and suddenly, like I always like used to tell this stereotypical thing, like you fight up and you get to the gates of the castle, and then suddenly it opens up, and this very kindly, fancy dressed woman comes out and says, "Oh, I apologize for our servants. We didn't mean to harm you on your way up. Please come in, come with me. Let me give you dinner or whatever." And it's like all of a sudden you get up there, and the witch and his servants actually are trying to lure you into joining them, you know. And also the issue with this with these dark fates, The dark fates themselves, so they're sort of outlined. They're not outlined like there's an idea.
Yeah.
The six fate. There are six fates you could get. You could have. You've made a deal with the witch, or a past allegiance. Someone you know from the past is going to come and ask you to repay an old favor. And of course, one of the popular ones is you want actually are there to get revenge on one of the other Ronin. Um, so the idea is that like the game looks very black and white, or the morals of the game look black and white as you are fighting all these monsters and climbing up the mountain. But then you get to the top and everything turns gray. It actually turns into, well, who really is good and who really is bad? Because you are, you are these samurai who want to be loyal, but then you realize you're Ronin. You have no master, and the government themselves treat you like a nobody. You're as low as they treat you as low as you can be. Are they actually the people that are willing that you should serve, or is it better to actually join this witch who is willing to actually give you whatever it is that you want? And one of the points in the I when I when I went back and actually sort of wrote this like couple page essay or whatever about the ambiguity of the witch, is I say the witch will never break his promise. If the GM says that the witch is going to do this thing, you know for sure he's actually or they, I should say, they are absolutely going to do the thing that they said they would. You know, um, so that was like the big one. Like all of those discussions I'd had at the Forge, they all understood to create that drama tension. The witch needed to be not obviously evil, but sort of that either um, he had to be somewhere in the middle,
Yeah.
or and also at the same time, you start off thinking that the government is good and Japan is what you're trying to save, but then it's like, really, is Japan actually being good? Is the country actually being good to these Ronin? And everything gets blurry, and that's why. And then in the end, even though the characters are all working together in the beginning, they all decide on their own individually, like who are they going to side with, and who are they going to help, and who are they going to turn against.
Nice. So the second edition, I suppose, was going to
Oh.
address.
I keep getting distracted by all of these other little rants of mine. Yeah. So what happened is, so I wrote this book, and also part of, it's like when you actually make a game or a tabletop game like that, half of the game is, or half of the project is the actual development, the rules development, and really the other half is writing a book. And you got to know how to express certain ideas. You got to know what is it that needs to be said versus what doesn't need to be said. And of course, that was my first real book that I had written, game book that I'd written. So I very quickly realized I needed to go back and sort of revise and add a couple details here and there. And in the very beginning, I thought it would basically be the same book, just tweaked. But as time went on, more and more it was like I learned more about how do people actually play the game. Obviously, I wrote the game assuming a certain style of play, but of course, you actually get it out in the public, and people sort of add their own little tweaks here and there, and they add their sort of house rules here and there. So for this second edition here, that I eventually finished, they the big thing is I've rewritten the book towards how people actually play the game, is sort of the big one.
Yeah.
Following that, I've added in tons of house rules. They're all optional rules. Like, for example, one of these house rules is like the Ronin, you start the game, you all have a zodiac sign, and you all have a unique one. And, the different zodiacs sort of interact with each other differently. Some of them really come together, and some sort of push each other apart. So at the very least, the zodiac that your characters get creates that initial social network of who likes who and who doesn't, right? But so like one of the house rules that someone came up with was, how about you also give zodiac signs to some of the major NPCs, some of these spirits or demons or whatever that you're talking to. Because then again, that immediately creates a certain amount of drama, because what if this demon guy suddenly likes this person over here but hates is constantly going against this person sort of over there, or what if there's even some sort of tension between these NPCs within the witch's castle. So it's that kind of stuff. So it was playing, right? So I rewrote the book to describe how people actually play and the issues that come up. I added all these house rules, um, and then there were a couple rules that I changed or tweaked. I don't want to say like the game is still fundamentally all the same, um, but like one of them is um, one of them is about the idea is can the character be killed, and the answer is yes, and that is definitely a tension you want in the game. And I did actually create these rules where even when a character is killed, the other PCs can still keep a relationship with that character, a pseudo relationship, so that the player of the dead character, can sort of remain in the game and influence play, right? Um, but it is like, and that makes a lot of sense in the end of the game. Like definitely I've seen sort of where like one character killed another, but then when the living character, the betraying character that killed the other, like when they finally go to fight whoever in the end, the guy they killed, of course, wants to betray them and act against them. Like that definitely adds this fun, dramatic element of when these sort of dead characters can still spend their trust points to affect how conflicts run out. But it is awkward if someone were to die early in the game. And there was a couple times where that possibility came up when I was GMing, and I just sort of, as a GM, I knew that would not be the funnest thing. So I would sort of split the success rather than just coming down on one person and killing them. So one of the rules I changed is just that the characters aren't they can't be killed until they've actually revealed their dark fate. And I guess that was something else about the dark fates is I was saying the players do create what they are, but in the beginning it is a secret. The cards, the cards for the dark fates get revealed. They are dealt privately, so that only the player, not even the GM, but only the player actually knows what fate they have. And then the players have, through the first half or so, they have the ability to sort of add in details that sort of either foreshadow what their fate is or is somehow connected. Because, like, if a player, like I mentioned before, if an old friend is coming in to ask for an old favor, you could, like when you get out of the forest and you're at the bottom of Mount Fuji, that you could add this factor where, like, oh, deep, as you're like sneaking around trying to find, like sneaking away around, you actually see this troop of soldiers off in the distance or up the mountain who are already climbing up in front of you. Like the player is allowed to add that there are these other troops that are climbing. And then, of course, you get up to the top into the castle, and the player reveals that he used to be part of this clan, this one particular clan, and all these soldiers were his old friends. And they want to ask him to. They've become some sort of rebellion, or they're a part of a clan that is fighting the central government. And they ask the player or that character to join them. So that kind of stuff. Sorry, I just spaced
That's
again
all
about where
good.
I was.
So it's clear the second edition like adds a lot to the first one. So it's the same core game with a lot of optional rules, rewritten so that it'll be more playable and more accessible. But
Yeah,
that version of the game never came out, which we're going to get to. But
yeah.
people who are backing the current project, which is part of a package of RPGs with Central Michigan University, what are they getting compared to what you had intended to put out with version 2?
Well, I mean, they are going to. I mean, they are going to get a printed edition of the new book. Um, as I explained to them in a message before, like at the time of the Kickstarter, the book really was, I would say, 97 or 98% done. And I did send the book out to other designer friends to review. And but what happened, I guess we might as well get into what happened with the Kickstarter. Of course, that is a big part of all of this. What happened is when I sent the when I sent this new edition out to get reviewed, there were a couple concerns that came up. One was about how the book was written, and part of that was how I, am somewhat of an old-fashioned forge player. Like that is still all very much in my mind when I play, but that newer players don't necessarily have all of that same sort of experience that I had, and so I had to be really more careful about how things were being explained, because it might again have been like how I was um, just making certain assumptions. Um, and and the other thing was with the one big rule that they had concern about is in character. So a character, I mean, characters are very simple. The rules of the game in general are very simple, but the characters basically they have the dark fate, they have a zodiac, they have they do answer these two background questions, and then they have abilities. They have two or three abilities. And in the original book, um, the abilities were just whatever you wanted. You could just say whatever you wanted, and you'd write them down. And it's interesting that sound like on paper that is so simple, but really in practice, it'd be like you'd be this like character creation would be like bam, bam, bam. Uh, like what should I have? Like it
Yeah.
suddenly slowed everything down. And also, it ended up being like half of the things people came up with really didn't have a purpose. They might have added color, to the game and to who their character was, but it really was sort of pointless of what these abilities were. So the idea I came up with was to actually have a list of abilities to that would both make things quicker and it would actually create purposes for what the abilities were. And the original in that draft for the Kickstarter, the thing that I had done is the abilities I had made up were kind of fantastic or fantasy, I should
Yeah.
say. They were the kinds of stuff you would expect in anime or in kung fu films or whatever. And my friends both were like, like these, like, how does this actually fit into the game? It's like you're trying to play like this, like dark, um, very serious, dramatically serious game, and yet you're willing to, like let them fly or pass through walls or like have flaming swords or whatever. um and I was like, yeah, you're right. And um but it was like I was having trouble, like, so the whole idea, like having to rewrite what I thought was already done and then also having to rethink this sort of big idea. um I just had all of this difficulty doing that for some reason. And that slowed everything down. And then people started asking why things were slowing down so much. And I just started freezing up. Um, and here, though, I have to bring up, if you guys don't know, I mean, my Kickstarter backers do, but actually, I had undiagnosed brain cancer. Um, and that was definitely present. It had, of course, there's no way to know exactly when it came up, but I have, even in retrospect, I was starting to have weird emotional and mental, well, not mental issues, but like my emotions and the way that I reacted to things were starting to change.
Mhm.
And looking back now, it was like I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know I hadn't learned to process what had happened or how to deal with all of that kind of stuff. And even still, it's when I started to freeze up in response to those questions, which were legit questions, I just froze. I can't even still to this day cannot fully explain how I felt or why I just you know froze up like that. But I admit I just kind of ran away. I didn't tell anyone what was going on, and of course that was before I had the cancer and everything. But still, when I was having these difficulties, I just sort of ran away and didn't talk to anyone about what was happening. Um, and even then, even when though that initial period, that's probably ended up being like the first year. I couldn't get over it. I couldn't settle down. I couldn't get back. Like I couldn't even think about the Mountain Witch. I had to
Yeah.
push like everything off to the side that concerned gaming for whatever reason. Even when I calmed down with all that, it just, for some reason at that time, I just could never think of new ideas. Again, it was like my thinking it was starting to change a little bit, or at least the way that my brain was working was changing a little bit. Um, and so there was the Kickstarter did end up stopping, and there did come a time. So I did reach this point where I thought like the good thing to do would actually be to save up the money and pay people back.
Hmm.
But that's when, basically, this is all the short version. That's when I ended up having these seizures in connection to my cancer, and I ended up in the hospital. And of course, going through all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I'll save that for another time. But obviously, I'm sure you all can imagine how hard and how difficult it is. I mean, you see people go through that kind of stuff, and it looks bad. But then when you're the actual person that's sitting there, I mean, it is so much worse. It's so hard, you know. And of course, the money, like, before my diagnosis, I still had the majority of the money. I still had plenty of money for the printing and all of that kind of stuff. Um, but of course, I wasn't working. And it was sort of like, to help out the family, we did end up having to dig out and pretty much spend all of that money that was from the Kickstarter in order to make it through that like year and a half or 2 years of treatment. Um, well, a year and a half of treatment, but probably 2 or 2.5 years before I sort of really got back into sort of a semi-normal life after that. Um, but that's where the Central Michigan University Press or came in, and I really have to thank them, and I really am not just sort of advertising for them. It really is like after I sort of got back into a normal life again, I really did feel, for my backers. It is, um, again, it's after getting diagnosed with cancer and knowing that you only have a certain amount of time left to live. Money really isn't a big deal, at least to me personally. I mean, of course, my family needs the money, but I myself don't care. You know, um, so I did my best. Actually, I cleaned up the text that I had for the Mountain Witch, and I actually did. It was interesting. The last couple of years, I feel more creative than I did, in the past. So I did at least for the ability for the or the rules about those character abilities. Um, I actually was able. I do have to thank Ron Edwards for this, who wrote Sorcerer. He did make the suggestion that I just make much more like practical abilities, like that a normal person would have. And that did lead me to what the new rule is in the book is you have these two normal abilities that are very common. Those come from a list in the book. There's stuff like, obviously, like you have armor, you have a bow and arrow, you know how to hide and sell, and sneak around. Um, those aren't the actual names, but you have all those kinds of stuff. But then also, if in connection with your dark fate, if you do want to have some sort of special ability that is totally made up by you, you're allowed to claim one of those as well. So yeah, so I cleaned up the text. I actually did. I feel like I solved that issue with that with those rules there. Um, And I do think, like, cleaning up, like I said, I actually could do kind of feel more creative now. Maybe I just know how to process things now, and I've learned to deal with sort of what the cancer has done to my brain. Um, but the book is a lot better now, written than it was, back actually during the time of the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But again, keep going off into rants. Uh, with the Central Michigan Press. So the point was is after my diagnosis and all that, like I didn't have the money for actual printing, and I really did feel really bad about that. I really did wish I could still somehow give the money back. Um, so I cleaned up the text and I sent out. Actually, it was on January 7th of this year. Uh, um, should I say 2nd, January 2nd of this year. I sent out the new book. Well, not the book, but a PDF of the new book, and apologized and really explain. Finally, after all these years, I had explained what had happened and what was going on with me and all of that. And then later too, a couple months later, like just finishing up and sending out the Mountain Witch. I got the urge also. I should just reformat not companion, the supplementary book, Quaidan, which for those that don't know, Qui-Gon actually, it's not a book I wrote, but it's a collection of ghost stories. There was this man, Lafcadio Hearn. He was European and he became this world reporter in the late 1800s. And he went in Japan, I forget why, but he like fell in love with the place. He became a citizen and he got married. Um, he was adopted into a family so that he could be considered a real a Japanese person, um, or citizen. But he continued to sort of record down actual sort of myths and lores and ghost stories and all of that kind of stuff. Um, so what I did was I took a few of his books and I selected stories from those books, from his books, and I compiled them into a supplementary text for the Mountain Witch. Um, so I did that as well. And anyway, and then it was after that that I was approached by Timothy Hutchins from the Central Michigan Press, and I say I'm so thankful. They really were the ones that came to me, and when I really did discuss, my primary concern wasn't about money. It really was like I wanted some way to get the book back out to the backers, to the Kickstarter backers. They were totally with me. They totally understood. They actually even were more giving than I was expecting them to. I just asked them to sort of have a lower price for the backers, and they actually said we'll do it totally at cost, or we'll find some way. We'll find the best way to like get the price as low as we can, which was that was even more than what I was expecting. They really have been great to work with, and they really do have a heart. They understand um, that this isn't just about making money and all of that kind of stuff.
Nice. Obviously, they're my friends, so I too am biased. Um, but I guess this kind of leads me to a final question then, which is, what does your gaming life look like now, both as a gamer and as a creator, and how do you see that developing?
I had a feeling you'd ask that. I don't play that much, not because I don't want to, just the way life has run. Of course, it was a lot easier before I have children, but now, these last several years I have children, so I have less time. And a lot of the friends that I used to play with have moved away. So, I don't play that much. I hate to say I've been toying with. I did have this other idea, which I've actually mentioned a couple times over the years. It's like it's not a new idea; it's an idea that's been with me for a long time. Which shortly I'll just say it is card based, and it does use a sort of made up tarot deck. I'll say it that way, and it's sort of like it's the meaning of the cards. Um, it's a fantasy game, I should say that right, but the meaning of the cards themselves get developed through play. They'll start off with these words that you write down, But then as you play, you will change the words and add the words and name these cards as you play. Um, and the desire there is to create a game that inspires you rather than having all these mechanics that tell you yes or no, but having more a game that really is about giving you, well, again, inspiration, giving you these thoughts, these feelings, these pictures, and then thinking of like letting that be where you jump off of.
Yeah.
Um, so that's, but I call it In a Land Called, dot 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 is the name of this. Um, but yeah, I have mentioned that in the past. Originally, the idea was to emulate a Final Fantasy game, um, but over time the idea was like, what is the Final Fantasy world? And it was really that the Final Fantasy games have these images or these symbols or objects or characters that get repeated from game to game, even though the world itself is different. And that's one of the things that led me into this idea of you're creating these symbols or images or metaphors that become the inspiration for your game, for your play, I mean. But who knows? I don't want to pretend like I'm immediately trying to restart my own game making and everything. But that was an old idea that, again, over the last year or so, I started to get new ideas for how it may or may not work.
Well, we'll see what the future brings. And then just one more question. You know, if people want to kind of follow you in your work, is there a place where you can currently be found online, or are you not a social media guy right now?
Right now, I'm not a social media guy. Again, with the Kickstarter and the running away, I totally sort of left the scene. So honestly, I'm not even sure where all of the centers, um, where all the centers are for different both gameplay and game development and all of that kind of stuff these days. I got to
Makes
admit
sense.
that I'm out of the loop.
That's all good. But any last things you want to say to people who are either former Kickstarter backers or people who are thinking about backing this game on BackerKit?
Um, yeah, I'm well, again, I it's the guilt of I still feel guilt about the Kickstarter. So of course I want to say I'm sorry, you know. But again, for this new series that the Central Michigan Press is starting, they aren't just trying to make money. They really are trying to both bring um, game design and tabletop role playing into sort of the academic space. They're trying to emphasize, um, how significant certain games are and which games are actually trying to sort of move things forward and everything. Um, Again, they're not being. This isn't just about a business. They really are trying to do a good thing. And again, that's why I feel really appreciated that they invited me to join into the. I think it's the Art and System series is what they're calling it.
It is. Tim, thank you so much for coming on. It's been wonderful to talk to you, and I really wish the best for you, for your health, and also for this project and future ones.
All right, thank you very much. I really do appreciate being able to come back and talk on an iPod or anything.
All right, everybody out there, please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions, check out the Backer Kit, and most of all, happy gaming.